Let me show you the way you can fund your fix and flip without using a bank. Hard money lending has been around for a long time in real estate investing. If you go to investor meetups, you can meet hard money lenders. Pretty much every town is going to have hard money lenders. Any town that has successful real estate brokers will have hard money lenders. Hard money lending is basically when someone just lends you direct money to invest in a project. It is a third party. It is not going to necessarily be a bank. It can be illegal. It can be certain banks. It's not going to be loans that are sold on the secondary market. They're going to contain a higher interest rate. They're going to contain points. And hard money lending, like we're talking about, never happens on owner-occupied properties. When it's an owner-occupied property, that sort of lending takes on a whole new set of criteria. And that is not what we're talking about. This is for fix and flips. This talks about how you can fund your fix and flip using Groundfloor. My name's Brian Johnson. I'm a real estate broker. I've been a real estate broker for my whole life. And if you like this kind of content, this is what my channel is all about. It is all about basically online real estate investing. And in this case, Groundfloor is an opportunity that I've shown on my videos before that how as investors, we can invest in other people's fix and flips. But we're going to do the flip side on this video. And I'm going to show you that if you have a fix and flip that you want to fund, how you can go to Groundfloor and you can obtain your funds from them for your fix and flip. So it's pretty simple. Here are the criteria right here directly on their website. They have no minimum transaction experience required. This is fantastic. You don't have to have done a bunch of projects. 5-year look back for experience, they're going to see what you've done, but it's not required that you've done a fix and flip before. The minimum property value is going to be $50,000. The minimum credit score for you as the borrower that's doing a fix and flip is only 640. If you have a credit score below 640, you're not going to make it in this case. But there are techniques to increase your credit score pretty quickly. So, here's one quick technique. Let's say you have a $3,000 credit card and you have a balance of $2,500. Well, one quick way to boost your credit card or your credit score is to call your credit card company and ask them to increase your credit limit. So let's say that $3,000, they increase it to $5,000, and don't spend on it. Don't go out and buy anything. And now your ratio, your ratio of what you owe on that credit card to your credit amount, now it's only 50%. You owe $2,500 on a $5,000 credit card. That will give you an instant boost to your credit report. So in this case, let's say you're the 620 or 630 credit score and you want to bounce it up to 640 or 650. That is one technique you can use to bounce your credit score up pretty quickly. Anyone can use that technique. There's a bunch of other techniques out there you can use, for boosting your credit score. Now, I'm not going to get into those on this channel. You can pull that up on other videos on YouTube, and there's a lot of cool videos. There's some channels that focus directly on how to fix your credit report. The term of these loans on these fix and flips is 12 to 18 months. You can see that right here. No hard credit pulls. Rates start at 10.5% and go up from there. Now, when you basically apply for one of these loans, they're going to evaluate you as a credit risk. So your credit score is going to come into play. Your experience in real estate and doing these is going to come into play as a risk factor. So if you haven't done any before, you're going to have a higher interest rate. If you've done a lot of fix and flips, you may look back and you can see that you're going to get a better interest rate. How you value your project is also going to be a risk factor in this. If you're willing to pay for an appraisal, that's good for the risk factor. If you aren't going to pay for an appraisal, well, if it's over $250,000, you're going to have to get an appraisal. I will provide right here in this description below the SEC filing that they have publicly listed on their website. I'll put that in the description below. It lays out every single part of how this works. But if you weren't to do it, now back to the valuation, if you weren't going to do an appraisal, you can get a BPO, which is a broker's price opinion. That's where you call someone like me, an independent third party. And I'm not asking you to call me in this case because I'm not going to be in your state. But you can call a real estate broker or a real estate agent, and they know what BPOs are. Basically, it's similar to a CMA, where they go out and they value the property. They're going to take pictures. They're going to look at the comps, and they're going to create a report. It's not an appraisal. An appraisal is very different than a BPO. An appraisal works backwards than the way an agent works. So, an appraisal lists comps. They never adjust the value of the subject property. They adjust the value of the comparables down. So if the main property you're trying to appraise is a 3-bedroom property, and you're comparing it to a 4-bedroom property, you take the value of that 4-bedroom property and you subtract the cost of a bedroom to come up with the comparable value of that comparable property. When a real estate broker does a CMA, they don't go through that detailed of a process. They may say they do, but they really don't. They're just going to go out and they're going to find out the sales comps and see what similar houses are selling for. And they're probably not going to be doing too many adjustments. They're just going to kind of eyeball it. I know a bunch of brokers might jump in here and say they do appraisal type adjustments, but I'll tell you, for the most part, brokers do BPOs. They do them for banks all the time. They don't really do appraiser type adjustments. So that's a little bit higher risk factor if it's a BPO than an appraisal for that reason. Now, another way that you can value the property, again, if it's one of the lower price projects that you're going to do, is you can basically, the borrower can do his own sort of BPO, higher risk. And then the fourth way is just the borrower is going to provide comparable properties on what they think your property, the investment, the flip that you're going to do, the after repair value to try and come up with that. You can just provide some comps. And there's some details in the SEC circular, though, like I said, it's in the description below, that kind of lay out how they would accept comps if you're going to do that. But that's sort of the tier on the risk factors for valuing the property. And appraisal's best, BPO is a little bit down here. The borrower's own valuation, BPO, or just providing comps. So honestly, I would go out and pay for an appraisal on a property like this. Call an appraiser. Appraisers have phone numbers. They don't like to return calls from real estate agents, but they'll return your call. And they'll probably do an appraisal for less than they would on a normal purchase. Maybe not. Again, a bunch of appraisers might jump on here and say they don't do that. But you'd be surprised if you call an appraiser directly what they might be willing to do on valuing property. Now, the loans that they offer range from $75,000 up to $750,000. And you can see right here, it says that they have true deferred payments. So you don't make any payments on this loan until it's all said and done. So during your project, they fund it toward, you get the money. You don't get it all at once either. You get it in draws. You're going to do part of the project, and then you're going to submit what you've done, and then they'll pay you for the work done. And you do that in steps. It's not just they're going to hand you over an entire lump sum of money. But, there's no payments during this process. Now, they'll loan you, it says right here, up to 70% loan to after repair value. So let's say you have a house that you want to fix, you want to flip it, and you do an appraisal and you see that if this house is totally fixed up, it's going to be worth $500,000. Well, that means they will loan you $350,000 towards this project. Now, from what I can read in the documents and going through the very detailed SEC circular, that can be used also for acquisition costs. So if you happen to come across a property that that you can acquire, let's say you can acquire a property for $200,000 and you know that you get the appraisal and it's worth $500,000 when you're done. That's pretty significant. You could fund that purchase price into the flip. That is pretty rare. I mean, if you're going to go to, find a hard money lender in your town, he's going to want to know you pretty well to get into that game. So this is pretty unique that they're offering this. Oh, by the way, what I did say earlier, that just find out a good real estate broker. There are real estate brokers in every town that make a lot of money. And a lot of those guys will fund projects for doing fix and flips. So I know I mentioned that earlier, that I'm going against what this video is about, which is using Groundfloor to fund your fix and flips. But I did mention that earlier. I want to go back to that to let you know that is also an option. But those guys are going to be pretty tight. They're going to want a lot of points. They're going to want a lot of interest rate. They might want some skin in the game. Now, when I read this circular, one thing I saw that one question is what are the points? Or what are the closing costs associated with this? And from what I can see, they're going to charge you 4 points and then $1,000 fee at sort of like a closing fee. So let's imagine that you borrowed $100,000 in this program to fund your fix and flip. They're going to fund you $95,000 that they're going to hold back $5,000. $4,000 would be the 4%. The 4%, let's say they call it points that they're going to charge you to fund the loan. And then that $1,000 sort of closing fee that they're also going to charge you. Now that would scale up. So I imagine on a $350,000 loan, figure 4% are going to be the points, and that $1,000 of that closing fee is what they're going to be charging you. then you're going to be paying interest, but you won't pay it monthly. It will fund at the very end. So it will accrue during your flip. And then when you sell your flip, then that money is all entirely, paid back to ground floor. And that is what the investors are investing in on ground floor. People like me, when I invest my money in ground floor, and I'm doing it as an investor to invest your fix and flip, that's where my money's going to you as the flipper. And then when you flip the property and you pay it off on the platform, then I am paid back. And then ground floor makes their money on these fees. One of the things that's the hardest part about doing real estate investing like this isn't the money. It's never the money. There's an unending source of money out there to fund a good project. It's finding good projects. And how do you do that? Well, one way, obviously, you can just go to the MLS, call a real estate broker. When you call a real estate broker, though, let's say you call me in my town to buy a property, I'm only going to show you things that are on the MLS. You're basically paying a serious retail price. I've done flicks and flips in the past. That's how I got started in real estate in 1991. And the way that we found properties was direct mail, door knocking, or calling people. And we weren't buying properties that were listed, because when they're listed, you've got commissions. And right there's 6% in most markets that brokers are going to receive, and the seller doesn't receive that. If you can get directly to the seller and there's no commissions, that's huge. So how do you find these sellers? Like I said, I would send out letters directly to homeowners. Dear owner, I'm interested in buying your property at this address. My name is Brian Johnson. And I would disclose, hey, I'm a real estate broker, but I'm not looking for a listing. You have to disclose that if you're a real estate broker. If you're not a real estate broker, you just send a letter. Hey, my name is Dave, and I'm a real estate investor in your town. Give them a little story about who you are. Tell them you're interested in their property. You can send these letters to basically any homeowner you want. One way to find those, you can find lists of homeowners. Just call a title company. They'll give you a list. They may charge you $10, but they'll give you a list of all the homeowners in an area if you want it. I wouldn't call the title company and get a list of every homeowner. I would call the title company and say, give me a list of all the homes in this geographic area, maybe it's a zip code, who haven't sold their home in the last 10 years. That is a great way to find people that have equity. Ideally, you want to find someone that owns their home free and clear. Maybe that's one tech. Yeah, I would say when you're doing a fix and flip, maybe it doesn't have to be necessarily free and clear, but you want a distressed property because you're doing, obviously, a fix and flip. So drive around town. That's another technique that we would use. Drive around town and just look at properties that look run down. Is the paint peeling? Is the roof looking bad? Though horrible roof situations can lead to other structural problems, I actually would stay away from necessarily those problems. The new roof nowadays on a property costs you $30,000. Maybe I'd move along from that one. I would look for bad paint, siding, maybe a broken window, really long lawns, grass hasn't been mowed in a long time. That's a big one right there. Those are properties that are going to be fantastic. Also, there are wholesalers there's wholesalers in every town. If you go on Facebook and you find a real estate investment group in your town, you will find wholesalers in your town. Reach out to these guys. Wholesalers do not want to buy properties. They want to flip their contracts. They go out, they find properties, usually distressed properties, drug properties, abandoned properties where the owner's out of town. They contact them. They negotiate a much better price than you can in almost every case. These guys are absolutely pros at negotiating the price down. And then go to them. Approach them and say, hey, I've got funding. I'm looking for a property. Here's the kind of money I have in the deal. If you have money to put down, that's even better. But if you can get a property down there at that 50% or better of the after repair value on a fix and flip, you might have the numbers to make this work. Ideally, let's go back to my first example of a $500,000 house. If I was to flip a $500,000 house and I was going to have to put money into fixing that property up, so a substantial repair project, I wouldn't touch that house for less than $250,000, for more than $250,000. That would be about my max price that I'd be willing to pay on a flip, because you're going to estimate your costs wrong. Closing costs are going to cost you 10% to close a property. By the time you have commissions involved, in my state, you've got a 2% excise tax. You're going to have title fees. You're going to have, maybe you have to throw some money in to entice the buyer to close the property. Maybe there's something that they want done, maybe some landscaping that they want done that you end up throwing in there. I would always figure a 10% closing cost ratio on anything that I was selling. Don't try to run the numbers down to the penny thinking you're going to pencil this thing and not be wrong. You're not. you are going to be wrong on your numbers. If you figure something's going to cost you $50,000 to fix up, guaranteed, I can almost guarantee it's going to cost you $75,000. If you are a super experienced fix and flip guy and you can get in there and do the work yourself, a lot of it, maybe you can tighten those numbers up a little bit. But if you aren't really experienced in fix and flips, I would take my budget on what I think if I was you and I was not experienced and I figured it's going to cost me $50,000 because I've looked at the property, I've penciled all the repairs I think I'm being done, I would instantly add 25% to that and assume that's what I'm actually going to spend. I would really do that calculation in that way. And I highly, highly recommend you to do too. That's why buying the property right up front is the way you make your money. There's a saying in real estate investments that you don't make your money when you sell the property, you make your money when you buy the property. Buying it right is what real estate is all about. So that means not overpaying for your property. So like I said, real estate brokers, you can go to them and find properties on the MLS. That is going to be sort of the low-hanging fruit, but unfortunately, that's not going to be the place usually for your best deals. Approaching other brokers, though, that do some, they may say you've got something, and if they have a property they want to get off their hands and it's a fix and flip, it's a rundown property, maybe they don't necessarily want to list it on the MLS, they want to just get rid of this contract really quick, maybe that would work. I know foreclosure auctions are always talked about. Maybe sometimes when this market nowadays isn't really a foreclosure market anymore. Anyone that's going into foreclosure probably has a ton of equity and they don't need to actually go into foreclosure, they can sell their property. And then the other way, just generally networking. Again, Facebook groups can be absolutely fantastic for networking. Other investors, now maybe they're not necessarily maybe they're not wholesalers, but other investors that bird dog and find properties, maybe they have too many projects they can't work on and they want to get rid of one. Investors, it's funny in the investor community, they don't hate each other. Investors love helping out other investors. So I would join Facebook groups for real estate investors. I would look at meetup groups online and go meet investors, go to their meetings and get to know these guys, tell them what you want to do. Always tell people that you have money not online. You have money ready to go to pull the trigger on a project. I wouldn't go tell someone that you have money from an online lender. Everyone hates hearing that. But to say you've got money and you're ready to pull the trigger is exactly what property sellers or investors looking to get rid of project really want to hear. So if you decide that you want to invest or you want to use Groundfloor, there is a link in the description below. I'll put it right at the top for Groundfloor for the website. You can go directly there to see if this is some way that you want to use to fund your property. If you are an investor and you want to invest in fix and flips, then also there's a link in the description. Click on that and you can look at the projects that you can invest in. You can earn, I see projects on here for 10 to a 14% return on investment. I've got a couple investments on here. I think I'm around that 12% mark. I like that mid-range. I don't like investing in the ones that are the super high interest rate because those are definitely going to be higher risk projects. And in real estate, I shy away from those higher risk projects. But like I said, as an investor, click on that link below down there if you want to invest your money here. And then also I have the SEC filing circular down below if you want to see the exact terms of what Groundfloor is offering.